Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I am putting together the whole series on cold therapy. So if you guys have watched clips from the other ones, this is the whole thing. I'm talking it through start to finish, all the details you need to know about starting into cold therapy and the benefits of it.
2019, I moved out to British Columbia, out to Kelowna, and I actually happened to get lucky and got a place right on the waterfront. Basically, if you guys know Kelowna at all, I was right down in that Green Bay area. So I could literally walk out my front door, go down to the lake, and boom, I was in the water essentially. And I could come back and like towel off really quick, easy. It was super convenient for me. And that's kind of where I got started with it. I had basically heard of Wim Hof, which is kind of the big name that's pushing cold therapy stuff more than anybody else. That's where people are hearing about it. They're hearing about this Wim Hof method, getting in the cold, doing his breathing, that type of stuff. And I had read his book out of some self-interest about just kind of seeing what all it was about, what everyone was raving about. Read that, and then that got me a little bit further. I listened to some more podcasts on it, and then I listened to, I got into some stuff from a guy named Brian McKenzie, who had a little kind of like PDF ebook type thing on hot and cold therapy. Read into that, and I kind of mixed the two of those a little bit together. Kind of pull from my experience what I feel is the pros and cons to each. So what you're going to get here is a bit of a mix of like some Wim Hof type stuff and some Brian McKenzie type stuff, mixed with just kind of like my personal thoughts on like managing the immune system and a bit of a Chinese medicine flair to it as well. So we'll get into all of those kind of details in it, but that's kind of my background. Got introduced to it through that, and then that winter came and I decided like, hey, why not? So as summer turned into fall and into winter, I just kept getting in the lake instead of like, oh, it's too cold now. I just kept going out, getting in. So it was kind of a nice slow introduction. As far as the temperature, like I got down to the lake there gets usually, I would say, between like 1 to 4 degrees. Every once in a while, the top layer will freeze over for like a day or two, but not very often. So yeah, usually we're sitting somewhere between 1 and 4 degrees in the lake in the middle of the winter. So I got to introduce myself to that over a gradual period of time. And I was spending anywhere between like 1 to 5 minutes in the lake all through the winter. I don't think I got every day, but I would say I would get like 5 to 6 days of the week. I would get into the lake all through that first winter. And then after that, I actually kind of moved away from that spot. So it got a little bit tougher to get into the actual lake, but I would try and do cold baths with ice dumped into there when I could, or I actually stayed in good contact with the people that I was renting from right down at the lake. So I would still go over there from time to time, say have dinner with them or something, and then jump in the lake. So yeah, that's kind of where I started. I started with the lake and then kind of regressed actually from there. I wish I still had the lake access a little easier. I moved out to Vernon after that, and so then now I would just drive down to the lake, which just inherently meant I was going a little bit less than I wanted to. I would still shoot to go anywhere between 2 to 3 times a week would be ideal, and then supplementing with cold showers. So that's kind of like my history with cold, and I'm gonna kind of share with you guys the experiences I've had with it. I've worked with a lot of people adding cold into their routine as well, and just friends and family being interested as well, just helping them through that. And so I'm pretty comfortable with the things that tend to be the hurdles or the questions that are asked about cold therapy. So we'll get into all of that. So what I want you guys to do, if you're watching it live, of course, throw in the hashtag I'm here. If you're watching it after the fact, throw in the hashtag replay, and we will get into all of the benefits of the cold now. So we're going to start by just kind of introducing like what are the types of cold therapy we can use. So at a very base level, we are essentially using cold therapy if you were to say turn off the heat in your house or go out into cold weather underdressed. The thing is that because it's a very small amount of cold, so to speak, then we need to have very long exposure times with that. So like if you went out for an hour-long walk in slightly cold weather, you would get some of those mechanisms starting to turn and work that we get from exposing ourselves to cold. Whereas if you went straight to the polar opposite of that would probably be like a cryo chamber. That's about as cold as it can get, and you jump in, jump out pretty much. and it's cold like so instantly and so much cold that you don't need to be exposed for as long a time to kind of get those same things turning. And then depending on like the how extreme that cold exposure is, you're going to get different responses in your body based off of that. So kind of we would say like cold weather or cold room, and then cold shower, kind of next one, cold like an ice bath or jumping in the lake, jumping in a cold like glacial river, something like that. And then finally cryo kind of being like the far end there. We're not really going to touch on cryo because I just don't see that it's accessible to most of us. Like if we're talking about that Okanagan area, I know one place that has a cryo chamber, and it is definitely not cheap, and it's not even in either or any of the like towns. You kind of have to drive out of town. It's up at like Silver, Sparkling Hills resort up there. I believe they have a cryo chamber. So not a whole bunch of access to cryo. So we're not really going to talk about that. We're going to focus most of our conversation on cold showers because that's what we all have super easy access to. And then we're going to talk about broadly all of the benefits that cold has. And that's, I would say most of that research is done more with like a cold or like an ice bath type situation versus the shower. There's less research done on the shower. But that's what we're going to focus on, and then we're going to go over all the benefits and then really narrow in on a couple that I think we get the most of from the cold shower in my experience. So the benefits are numerous. We can start with kind of the effect that we get when we first get in. So that like kind of like, holy crap, this is cold. What's happening there is we're getting that release of adrenaline, noradrenaline, dopamine. Bunch of hormonal responses are happening at that time. So that adrenaline response is kind of like that fight or flight, right? So when you get into a situation, it really elevates you, and that's that cold, and you're like, wow, I am focused, I'm here. And that's what's happening within your body. And then you're also getting a dopamine response alongside that. One of the really interesting pieces about that dopamine response is how long it lasts for us, which we'll get into when we narrow in a little bit more on the mood boosting effects of it. So release of adrenaline, noradrenaline, dopamine, and then next we have activation of brown fat adipose tissue, which is going to have an effect on our like increase in our sensitivity to insulin, basically, which is really good for us. So everyone hears this like, ooh, brown fat activation and thinks like, oh, I'm gonna lose weight from this. Unlikely that you're going to lose 10, 20 pounds from just getting in an ice bath. It's more about all the like accumulative effects that you're going to get from it. And honestly, with this piece, like the insulin, regulating your insulin sensitivity is more important than losing a pound or two. Next piece is we are going to increase our metabolic rate. Depending on the research, it definitely varies, and depending on the method of it. So a big part of like that metabolic rate and like change that we get is based on like what your body has to do to keep warm, right? So when you get in that cold, depending on how cold it is, how long you're in there, and how you choose to reheat is going to dictate the metabolic change that you get. So if you got in quite cold water for a pretty long time, and then you force yourself to re-warm yourself without using exercise, say a sauna, a hot shower, hot drinks, you just waited for your body to reheat itself, you're going to get a stronger effect in that area versus if you just had a quick 10-second at the end of your shower, had a quick 10 seconds of cold or 30 seconds of cold, and then hopped out of that. You're really not going to get a huge change in the metabolic rate there, because we have to understand that our body, think of it like a room with a thermostat and the actual room temperature. So we have to stay in something long enough to change the temperature in the room, not just the thermostat. When we just hit cold quick or just hit hot quick on our body, that's changing what the thermostat thinks the room is at. It's like going and putting a lighter under a thermostat or an ice cube to a thermostat versus waiting for the entire room to warm up or cool down. That's going to make a much bigger effect than to hold a ice cube or a lighter to a thermostat. So that's an important piece to understand with the change in metabolic rate, is that it's going to be dependent on how much does your body temperature drop and how far does it have to reheat, and how does that reheat process happen for you. Next one is an increase in immune cells and a stronger immune system, essentially. So we can look at this from the Western perspective, which is essentially that we're increasing our like natural killer cells, T cells, these kind of things, which for most of us is going to sound kind of boring and a quick conversation to have about it, which is where I like to bring in the Chinese medicine part. I feel like it's somewhere where we can have a bit deeper conversation of like, okay, yes, from the Western perspective, we're seeing an increase in those cells. That's cool, that's awesome, that's fantastic. But like from the Chinese medicine perspective, what we have, think of like your body having like an outer protective barrier on it, and they're like, kind of think of your pores as being able to open and close. So with Chinese medicine, we have this like protective like qi energy that we call it, that essentially is keeping us from like things from coming in and invading us, so bacteria, viruses, that kind of thing. And when we use both hot and cold, what we're actually doing is basically like strengthening that and like reminding our body to like open and close those gates a little bit and get used to. So if let's say hypothetically we don't ever get into cold, get into heat, sweat, those kind of things, then if these are the gates and they're swung closed, but they don't open and close that often, there's kind of some like dirt in the hinges, it's a little gummed up, and our closed is actually like this instead of like fully closed. It's like, yeah, it's closed, but it could be more closed. Then when we start to getting in the cold and the hot, when the heat would be like kind of open that up, those doors all up a bit, open things right up. Cold would be like, okay, it's here, and it shuts it right down to there. So what basically the hot and the cold are doing, and that like extreme temperatures are doing for us, are taking that Wei Qi and like forcing it open and closed and reminding our body that like, hey, you have to like strengthen this and engage this part of your body. So that's kind of where that comes in. I just think that's like a cool, kind of interesting aside and a way to explain it from a different perspective than what we're used to seeing. And then next piece here we have increase in mitochondrial biogenesis. So what does that mean? Essentially, it just means that we are creating more ATP, which means more energy essentially for our body. So very simply, it creates more energy in our body. Think back to that reheating process. If you're constantly getting exposed to cold, eventually your body's gonna be like, damn, we need to figure out a better way to reheat this. So like if your body was a house and you had a wood stove to heat that house and you figured, yeah, I need this much wood to heat it for the day, and then you kept getting exposed to these really cold temperatures, eventually you bring in this much wood to heat your house for the day. So that's essentially kind of what's happening, is that we're bringing more, like we have more energy available through that process because we're having to constantly reheat. Next one, and I think this is one of the really cool ways that we can use cold, is to reduce inflammation. So both systemic inflammation and more localized inflammation. So when I say systemic, what I mean by that is the difference. Localized inflammation would be like, for instance, like I sprained my ankle, there's tissue damage there, we know the inflammatory response has to happen, there's inflammation there. That would be localized inflammation. When we're talking about systemic inflammation though, that's a much bigger, that's like a whole body thing. So if there's something that you would say were putting into your body, or you had been exposed to something, these types of things, or an autoimmune response, stuff like that, where we have inflammation, it's not localized, it's through our entire body. So sometimes this will pop up as people with like chronic migraines. That can be like a systemic inflammation type issue for us. Fibromyalgia, what else? Anyways, lots of options there for what causes systemic inflammation and like things that we see as a result of that. So getting into that cold can help bring down those systemic inflammation levels as well. One thing, as far as like if you're thinking about like training and then going to cold right after, I would definitely wait 1 to 2 hours before doing cold. If you're really focused on building muscle, it's going to inhibit that a little bit. If you're looking more to just be able to, say if you were going to a CrossFit event and you needed to have like multiple hard consecutive workouts, you could use the cold to kind of delay or like offset that like inflammatory response, that muscle soreness, that fatigue, all of that. You can basically recover a little bit quicker by having the cold right away after, but it blunts other things like muscle growth. So depending on what your goals are, you want to be careful on exactly when you want to get in that cold, whether that's right after like a run or a workout. If it's actually before, there is some evidence on doing it before for long endurance events in hot weather. But again, you have to be careful with like how you go from cold to warming up and actually exercising. And then whether you want to go right after, you want to wait 2 hours after. I would say most people wait a couple hours after. So I would usually put it first thing in the morning as the main time to do that. Tends to not be getting kind of caught up with other things like your workouts the rest of your day. You just go do it first thing in the morning and it's done with. And it's a really good way to wake up. So those are kind of like the main benefits that we're getting. Except for two other ones, which is basically this mental resilience or this stress resiliency, helps you manage stress and like tolerance to your environment kind of. So basically all that means is like managing your emotions, managing your nervous system. And that's where I find the cold showers are one of the strongest pieces. I honestly find it is harder to get into and do the cold shower thing than it was to go and get in an ice cold lake every day. And that includes the walk to and from the house. Because the ice cold shower is just like, it hits me here, I turn, it hits me here, it hits me here, but the rest of my body's still kind of staying warm and you're just getting pockets of it hitting you. Mentally, it is definitely harder versus like, hey, go jump in off the dock, fully submerged in cold water, and then settle in, sit there, and just like manage your breathing. You're fully covered by it, and your whole body just kind of is getting hit by it at the same time. It honestly feels easier to me. So biggest piece for me and most accessible piece for us is the cold shower. We can all do it. All you have to do, turn the knob to cold instead of hot in the morning. All the other ones, the ice bath, takes a bit more work to it. The cold shower, though, we all have access to, and we can all get a ton of benefits, especially when we're talking about that piece of like, I'm going to go do something that I don't particularly want to, and I'm going to lean into it, and I'm going to say, I'm going to go do it, even though I don't want to. So that's where I think the biggest benefit comes, and the most accessible form of the cold is going and having that cold shower and beating that mental block every single day and going, just being like, yep, I got this, because when you can do that, what else can you accomplish in that day? Does that mean if you can go and beat that cold shower, you can probably beat that chocolate chip cookie or whatever it is later. You can decide to work out a little bit longer. You can decide to go to the gym instead of bailing on it. All of these things really, it just like is a form of training for us to get past those mental blocks and build in that discipline and that habit and that routine in the morning. And a big benefit that makes it so much easier for us to do, it's like, yes, this is a very hard mental piece for us to overcome, but when we go and we get in it, we get that hit of dopamine and adrenaline, which reinforces that for us. So same way now, like when you feel bad, you go and you have like chocolate and ice cream or something, and it's like, yeah, you get a little bit of a reward. It feels good. So that kind of like rolls into supporting that negative habit of like this, when I feel bad, I go and I have these sweets, but I actually get rewarded for having the sweets because they're like sugary sweets. And we just know that like that's how sweets work essentially. But with this, it's like, hey, I'm gonna go do something that I don't want to necessarily do, but in the end is good for me, and my body's gonna reward me for that as well. So that's a huge piece. So as I said earlier, I would talk more about the dopamine effect. So most things that give us that hit in dopamine is like a very short, quick hit in dopamine, and then we're left wanting more of it, and because it's such a short, heavy hit of it. But the cold is a little bit different. So they did a study and they saw that it was extending like 2 to 3 hours after the fact that there were still elevated levels of dopamine and upwards of like 200-300% sometimes. So it can be very powerful for anyone who struggles with like getting up in the morning, mood, that kind of slow, sluggish, depression, those kind of things, anxiety even, because of that effect of dopamine. And so think, we're in the middle of the winter now, perfect time for you guys to get started. The cold showers are a little bit colder. If you have access to like a lake or something, obviously that's an option too. If you're doing that one, be safe, make sure you have a way to warm up, get back to like a warm location, that you're not going to have any incidents in the water, especially the first times. Make sure you have somebody with you. All of those obvious things that we need to say, make sure you're doing those if you're doing it like outside the house in a cold environment. But in the winter, we get that, we have everything we need for the cold, and that tends to be when that seasonal depression comes in the most. So definitely we can leverage that cold at that time of year to kind of boost our mood a bit. So those are the biggest pieces that I think you can get out of that cold shower. So next piece is like, how do I go about doing this? I've never done it before. So best way to do this is If you've never done it before, you have two options. You can either go full in, full send, jump into it, or you can ease your way into it. So if you want to ease your way into it, what I recommend is over the course of a week, so let's start with Monday, you have your normal warm shower in the morning, and then you turn it to cold for the last 30 seconds, manage that. Next day, have your normal shower, turn it to cold for a minute. Next day, a minute and a half, 2 minutes, so on and so forth, until you're at the end of the week. And then the following week, I would just go, nope, I don't get the warm shower anymore, or I get less and less of the cold shower. I get 30 seconds less, I get a minute less, until you get to that whole just a cold shower, where you're starting the shower cold, finishing the shower cold. And then once you're doing a full cold shower, you want to shoot between, I would say 1 to 5 minutes, depending on what you can handle. 5 minutes is kind of where I prefer to be, is in that 3 to 5 minutes, because I think you're getting enough of the cold that you're getting more beyond just that like mental resiliency, like bam, cold water on me. Part of it, you're actually starting to drop your body temperature enough that you're going to see some of these other effects starting to take place. And that's one of the differences between just having a cold shower, I find, and getting in like a full ice bath, is back to that thermostat versus the room. When you just have a cold shower, yes, it's still cold, hits you in the face, cold on your body for a minute, and we definitely get the hormonal response and that mental part really stimulated, but we don't actually change the room and the temperature in the room all that much compared to when we get into like an ice bath. So I find the cold shower is like very powerful for the mind, and then the ice bath gets into more of the other stuff for the rest of the body. So that's how I would do the cold shower, is progress into it, or just fully go into it between 1 to 1 to 5 minutes, being a good starting point. If you guys want to go beyond that and get into like an ice bath, my suggestion, fill that foot tub full of cold water, and then grab about 3 of those big bags of ice, tear them open, dump them into the water, and then don't get into it right away. Give it, say, 5 to 10 minutes for the ice cubes to actually bring the temperature of the water down and cool that water even more before you get into it. And then do anywhere between probably, if you're new to it, 1 to 3 minutes. If you're a bit more experienced with it, you can get back up to that 5-minute marker. Big piece for us is like, if we are in that and we start to really heavily shiver, that's definitely your body telling you it's a sign like, hey, time to get out. So even if you're not at the marker that you want, but you're heavily shivering, then it is time to get out anyways. Just listen to your body on this stuff, you guys. So that's how I would do the ice bath. And then obviously the lake, we talked about that a little bit. Make sure you're doing it in a safe environment is kind of the biggest piece there. And then when we're doing this, and there's a couple ways to do it. So what we're essentially doing when we get in the cold is using the elevation of our nervous system to actually bring it down lower. So if this is the baseline that we want to be at, most of us actually operate about here. We're stressed out, whether that's work, city life, whatever it is, we're a little higher than what we want to be. And then where the cold shower or the ice bath comes in is even higher up here. So because we're already elevated, to down-regulate our nervous system, we can either try and come just down, or by going to the extreme and coming higher, it allows us to drop below that base that we were already at. So that's how we're actually using that cold therapy, and that like, bam, like this is really cold, to actually down-regulate the body, versus you would think, oh, this is up-regulating, and it certainly can be up-regulating, especially when you first get into that cold. But then we're able to, because we go to this high-end piece, we see the black and the white, right? Like, you don't know what good is without bad. You don't know what hot is without cold, all of those things. When we go up here, it allows us to bring our nervous system back down. So there's 2 ways that we can approach this. We can either approach it as like, okay, let's get really hyped up and let's go get in that cold, and like, woo, like jumping up and down, breathing like quickly, and maybe you do some push-ups or some air squats, and you go running off into the water, and you're like, yeah, I got this, all hyped up. That is one option, and that's really like, how high can we elevate that? Or what my preference is to try and stay as calm as possible through that stimulus. So that would look more like, hey, like cool, calm, walk over to that water, nice and calm, like walk over there, managing your breath, then try not to have any response when that cold hits, and just continue to breathe normal, not like get elevated, not like hold your breath, any of that. Just go, get in it, settle in, stay as calm as you can, get out nice and calmly. And they're both going to be beneficial. They're both going to, in the end, help us regulate our nervous system. Just two different approaches that we can go at it with. I prefer the one of like cool, calm, because I think we are all so amped up already that I don't know that we need to go that much higher. I think just the cold is high enough for us that we don't need that extra little boost on top of that. Just like come up, then try and come down. And when you can get into that cold and manage your nervous system, you wouldn't believe, especially as you continue to practice this, how much that transfers over to other day like things. Like suddenly you're in traffic and somebody cuts you off. Instead of screaming at them, you're just like, oh, whatever, carry on. Or like whatever stressful environment, something in your environment comes up that's very stressful, you will eventually learn that like your response to it is just, you're still responsive to it. So if like a dog suddenly barks out of nowhere, or a screaming horn and brakes locking up, you're still responsive to it. It's not to say that you don't respond to it, but then as soon as that moment passes and you realize there's no danger there, you're, instead of staying elevated now, you're able to just be like, and back to where I was. So that's one of the other huge pieces that I see happening for people as they continue to do this, is that they just have better day-to-day regulation of their nervous system. So if we're looking at that kind of more chilled out version of it, where we're not amping ourselves up to go get in the cold, we're trying to stay pretty cool and calm with it, here's my suggestion as far as like a breathing protocol to go with it. So remember, once we're in the water, we want to shoot for like 1 to 5 minutes in there. We want to approach it nice and slow. So what I do is a breath cadence that basically it's like you have the option to like inhale, hold, exhale, hold. So there's going to be 4 numbers there. So what you're going to do is like an inhale, 3-second inhale, no hold, 4-second exhale, no hold. So it would be like a 3-0-3-0, and you'll do 3 breaths at that. So 3-0-3-0, and then you're going to do 3 breaths at 4-0-4-0, 3 breaths at 5-0-5-0, and go up and up and up and up until you're ready to get into the water. Or basically you'll learn to time like where that high end point is for your breath, like the longest breaths you can do comfortably, and timing like, hey, time to get into the water. So like in my case of like walking over to the lake, I would time that knowing like when I left my house at this cadence to get to the water, I want to be at my like 6s, 7s, or 8s, or whatever it is, so that I just like finish that off and into the water I go. Or if you're doing it in the shower, just spend time there, standing there, like 3s, 4s, 5s. Okay, 5's where it's at for me, or 6 is where it's at for me. And then you go, you get in the water. As soon as you guys get in the water, first thing I want you to do, you're going to want to panic. I want you to try not to panic. I want you to just take 10 nice, slow, deep breaths, as steady and slow and calm as you possibly can, and do it all through your nose. So most of the breathing I get people to do is always through your nose. There's a reason for that. We won't get into it, but the nose is meant to breathe. Use your nose to breathe for these. So once you get into that cold, just try and like calm yourself as much as you can. 10 breaths, nice, easy, slow, calm breaths in and out as our starting point to really settle into it. If you're going for 3 to 5 minutes or something, you're going to obviously go beyond that 10 breaths, and you just want to continue that nice, slow breathing pattern. If you're like really shocked by the cold, that 10 breaths is like a really good thing to focus on. And by that 10th breath, usually your nervous system has settled into like, okay, I'm in cold water, I'm okay. So if you're new to it, make that your focus, is like, even if you don't do a minute or 5 minutes or 3 minutes, whatever it is, get 10 breaths in before you get out, so that you're not just like, oh, I'm shocked, jump out. You at least do a little bit of time in there, learn to manage your nervous system a bit better, so that the next time you're a little bit better each and every time that you get in there. And then to finish it up, when you get out of the water, there's a couple ways that we can kind of finish this off. So we can either do basically like 5 rounds of 10 breaths with a breath hold, and it's kind of like a hyperventilation type breath. So it's kind of looks like this. It's like, and we do 10 of those, and then we fully exhale, hold for 10 seconds, and then go back to that and do that 5 times. And that kind of can use your breath to warm you back up. So that would be kind of like option 1. Option 2 that you can use is like a 1-2-1-0 breath. So that would be like the cadence for it. It wouldn't usually be the 1-2. So it would look more like 3-6-3-0. So 3-second inhale, hold for 6 seconds, 3-second exhale, go right back into the inhale, 3-second inhale, 6-second hold, 3-second exhale, 3-second inhale, so on and so forth. That's another option to kind of like finish it off and warm you back up. Last one is to basically, if you guys have ever seen any Wim Hof type stuff, basically he'll get in the cold and then he'll do what's basically called like a horse stance. So think like a wide squat and like a quarter squat, and then he'll kind of do this hand movement where he's like this, and he's doing some breathing work. Really, I think a big piece of that is that you're getting that rotation, you're getting that breath, and you're getting movement. I don't think it's necessarily specific that it has to be that exact movement pattern. I'm sure if you were to ask him, he would say that's just what I kind of chose, because you're in that quarter squat, your legs are engaged, so they're working, you're rotating through your entire core, you're moving your arms, you're circulating blood everywhere, you're forcing the whole body to work a little bit. So another option to warm up is just like light movement exercise to help warm you up again as well. And those are all ways that you're going to warm yourself up naturally, whether that's through like breath, movement. Fourth option would be to go jump in a sauna, a hot tub, a warm bath, a hot shower, those kind of things. Have a big glass of tea, put on some warm clothes, and use that to help warm your body back up a little bit. With that, if your goal is really to increase your metabolic rate and get some of these other benefits, you're probably not going to get quite as much of that because you're not letting your body warm itself up. You're doing it, but obviously there's tons of benefits to things like sauna as well. So I also personally love going back and forth with contrast. So just depends on what your goal is exactly. You're going to definitely, if you're getting in the ice bath, you're going to get all of those benefits. Even if you still warm up, you're just not maybe going to get quite as much of certain ones, but you're still going to get that, all of the benefits that come with like that shock of the cold. So don't be too worried about that. If that's what's deterring you from getting in, is like, oh, well, it takes me a really long time to warm up. That's probably a sign that you need to work on that side of things. But you can also, like, if you have a set amount of time and it's like, I need to get to work and not be shivering, then it's like, okay, go have the hot bath, whatever, it's fine. So those are kind of options for it as far as how we can warm up. And usually with the cold shower too, you typically don't need to do a warm up with it, like of the breathing after, or like putting on excess clothes, or jumping in a sauna, or having a hot shower after. If you're only doing 3 to 5 minutes of cold showers, you're pretty good to just get up and your temperature in that room again doesn't drop so low that you might want some of those other options. The shower is pretty good that way. It's more when you're getting into ice bath type stuff. So that's pretty much what I got for you guys on the cold.
All right, you guys, thank you so much for tuning into the video. I know it was a long one. I hope you got a ton of value out of everything in there on cold therapy and how to basically get started, what are the benefits, all of that. If you have questions, always just drop them into the comments and I will get back to you on that. If you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe, and I will see you guys on the next one.